Apple Corporation is in big trouble, and here's the reason. Have you ever wondered why third-party apps and accessories can't connect with your iPhone? Well, the simple answer is that Apple is making it difficult for users to switch to other devices. This is more like an ecosystem lock-in technique, and according to the US Department of Justice, Apple has been playing some serious games. Meanwhile, they're not accusing Apple of making their own products better. It's more like Apple is intentionally making other products worse. However, this isn't Apple's first rodeo with lawsuits over being a monopoly bully, but it's definitely the biggest one yet. As things get intense, we can only wonder if everything we ever knew about innovation and competition is true. Get ready for a wild ride through Apple's monopoly mess. A story that will practically change how we see tech and competition. Apple is a global tech giant known for its iPhone softwares and gadgets. Started in 1976, it now ranks among America's big 5 tech companies alongside Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook, and Google. Meanwhile, there's more to how the company grew so large. The thing is, Apple keeps buying other companies, and some people call this monopolistic because Apple tries to take control of a lot of the industry without giving others a fair chance. Some argue that Apple faces competition. It doesn't really matter because Apple is so rich and powerful compared to the others. Despite being popular, many Apple customers don't realize how much control Apple has. So it's important for consumers to know that big tech companies like Apple use techniques like controlling the App Store and eliminating competition to stay on top. As the primary provider of apps on iOS, Apple's App Store holds complete control over not only app developers who choose the platform, but consumers and their access to apps as well. This means the developers have to pay Apple a chunk of their earnings, sometimes up to 30%, just to be on the App Store. In essence, developers might have to raise prices for users or cut back on new features. Big companies like Spotify have spoken out against Apple's rules, saying they force them to raise prices too. The EU even accused Apple of breaking antitrust laws because of this. For users, there is no other option besides the App Store, so Apple can set whatever price it wants. Take for instance, Spotify's monthly subscription went up when they had to pay Apple more money. Apple also controls what developers can say in their apps, like not letting them mention cheaper payment options. These strict rules show how much power Apple has over developers and users. But not everyone agrees that Apple's acting like a monopoly in the tech world. Some people say Apple can't be a monopoly because it's always battling with the other big companies like Samsung and Microsoft. For instance, Samsung actually has a bigger share of the global smartphone market than Apple does. In the second quarter of 2021, Samsung had 18.2% of the market, while Apple had 21.9%. And when it comes to desktop computers, Microsoft's Windows operating system is way more popular than Apple's. As of September 2021, Windows had a whopping 76.96% of the global market. But even though these stats might seem like Apple's not in control, they don't change the fact that Apple's still super powerful. Meanwhile, Samsung has been accused of copying Apple's ideas multiple times and had to pay billions of dollars in fines for it. And when you look at brand value, which is basically how much people trust and like a brand, Apple always comes out on top. Apple's brand is worth over $230 billion, way more than Microsoft or Samsung. But how did they end up dominating the tech world, even after its slow growth compared to its competitors? Apple's control over its loyal customers has been key to its ongoing success and dominance in the tech world. On the other hand, their control has made it tough for other companies to compete. A survey found that almost half of college students would stick with Apple products even when there were other tempting deals around. In Indonesia, iPhone users showed remarkable loyalty, with the majority believing that the benefits of owning an iPhone outweigh the cost and planning to stick with Apple for their next purchase. Compared to Samsung, Apple has maintained a much higher customer loyalty rate over the years. But while Apple's brand loyalty may seem positive, a big part of it comes from the closed ecosystem they have created. The way Apple locks its users into its products and services makes it hard for them to switch to other platforms. Even if users want to switch, the high costs and the fact that the content bought through Apple can't be transferred to other platforms like Android make it a tough choice. This gives Apple a lot of power over both the users and the market. essentially making them the kingpin. And it's not just users feeling the effect of this monopolistic control. Other tech businesses also feel Apple's dominance. Moreover, Apple's habit of buying up other companies is another way that they have managed to remain top of the tech industry. They do this to break potential competition and keep their position on innovation. According to Apple's CEO, Apple always purchases a new company every couple of weeks. For example, they bought MobiWave, a company that works on payment technology, for $100 million. Even though it might seem like a small purchase for Apple, they used it to launch their own credit card and get into a whole new area of business. Usually, Apple isn't interested in keeping the companies they buy. They mainly want the smart people who work there. This can be a problem because smaller tech companies struggle to grow and compete when Apple keeps grabbing up all the talent. To top it off, they have also bought some big-name companies to keep their dominance intact. They dropped a cool $3 billion to buy Beats Electronics LLC, a move aimed at staying ahead in the music industry and outdoing their competition like iTunes. Another example is Siri, Apple's voice assistant. Siri started out as its own company before Apple swooped in and bought it for about $200 million. This pattern of swallowing big and small companies shows how Apple plays the game of monopolizing the tech world. Should this monopolistic game ever be considered illegal by any means? After so many years of Apple dominating the tech industry, the Department of Justice is taking legal action after accusing them of breaking antitrust laws by deliberately making smartphone experiences worse for everyone to keep their monopoly. The smartwatches are a good example of how the DOJ says Apple locks users into its ecosystem. If you have an Apple Watch, you can only use it with an iPhone. While you can use other smartwatches with an iPhone, they just don't work well. However, the lawsuit claims that Apple intentionally limited the capabilities of third-party watches, reserving the best features only for Apple Watch owners. Apple deliberately made it inconvenient to use anything outside their ecosystem, knowing it would push people to buy an Apple Watch and make it a selling point for iPhones. For starters, the DOJ argues that this strategy unfairly makes it hard for other companies to compete effectively. You see, making a good product is one thing, but deliberately making it difficult for others to compete crosses the line into anti-competitive behavior. The lawsuit also talks about digital wallets, which is a big concern. For years, Apple has made it impossible for any other wallet besides its own to use its tap-to-pay feature. This is slowly changing in the EU after lots of legal battles. We all know Apple's wallet is the only option for storing your credit cards, ID, movie tickets, and even your car keys, and for making contactless payments in stores. So Apple makes a lot of money from this, about 15 basis points on every credit card purchase made with Apple Pay. According to estimates from the U.S. Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, Apple Pay facilitated nearly $200 billion in transactions in 2022 alone. So, Apple's cut out of that could be around $300 million. According to the lawsuit, Apple hindered the success of super apps on the iPhone because they saw them as too powerful. Super apps are basically what they sound like, apps that can do a bunch of different things, like a dashboard that connects you to a lot of mini programs and features. So Apple has always been worried that if an app could do everything, people might focus more on the app itself than on the iPhone it's running on. According to the lawsuit, Apple saw these super apps as a big problem. They kept mentioning low stickiness and low switching cost, meaning people might not feel as attached to their iPhones if they could get cheaper Android phones with just as good apps. Super apps could replace the need for the iPhone's own operating system and apps, making smartphones more like basic commodities. Basically, Apple doesn't want its iPhone to play second fiddle to any app. So according to the DOJ, Apple put restrictions on how these apps could make money and advertise, even going so far as to ban certain kinds of icons or tiles within the apps. Apple's defense is that their rules do allow for super apps, but culturally, people in the US and other markets aren't interested in using them. Messaging is another issue mentioned in the lawsuit. While regular SMS text messaging works on every phone, the iPhone blocks third-party apps from using it. But with Apple's own messaging app, you can communicate with anyone as long as you have their phone number, regardless of what kind of phone they have. Do you think Apple's control over its App Store and digital ecosystem limits consumer choice? Also, do they deserve to be sued by the US for monopolizing the tech industry? We'd love to know your thoughts in the comments section. Don't forget to drop a like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.